Hi, my name is Tova and I make ceramics and I also teach pottery classes on the weekends. I recognize that throughout the pottery process, there's so many infinite ways to make a mistake. And as an instructor of a 6-week class, I'm in week 4. They are still trimming their pieces, and I figured I can actually talk through this with you guys to practice and help myself be able to provide better instruction for my students. So this piece was actually covered originally by plastic after I threw it, and that was just to help it dry really slowly. My piece was also placed on a wear board to help it dry consistently as well. And I have a few tools that I'm going to use during the trimming process. I have a metal thing. I'm going to figure out the names of these tools to actually scrape it underneath off the wear board if it hasn't already lifted up by itself. I have a needle tool, and I have 2 ribbon tools at different sizes, and this is up to you what these tools kind of look like to help trim and clean up your process. And the whole reason why we're trimming it is because, as we made the pottery on the wheel, we focused on the top and the inner part in the base of the piece. During the trimming process, we actually flip the piece over and we'll trim the bottom layer off, and we're going to allow the piece to get a little bit lighter. Take a look and kind of recognize how heavy the piece is. It's usually pretty light. And so this is the opportunity to kind of pull out some of the weight of that clay, get it an even consistency. I like to create a base, one, because if I have a runny glaze, the glaze can just drip on the trimmed legs versus dripping on the kiln shelf, which we don't want. So yes, the legs help with reducing any runniness from the glazes, but it also keeps the piece stable. Like, it helps the piece be level. And if there's any condensation, this is just a great way to mitigate that before it actually is hitting the table. So there's just a couple different things that I actually think about when I'm trimming. Like, what does the leg look like? And I know there's infinite ways of how we could actually create this leg. Is it like a flat leg? And I'm gonna actually just find some examples to show you guys of what this could look like. So I actually have kind of a signature look of how I create my trimmed legs, and here's an example where it's just a square leg. It's pretty thick. This is an actual planter, so I trimmed holes in it after I trimmed the piece. And here's another version of a plate that I actually painted underglaze. I added a 24 karat luster fire after on that 3rd firing. But here's another example of how I trimmed the bottom, and they're pretty lightweight. And so you can see how like my glaze ends there, and then there's like another leg where if the glaze were to run, it would just like slide down the leg first. And then here's a very tiny version of what that looks like. So I'm gonna just actually before I bring my stuff to the wheel, I'm going to actually pick up the piece off the board, and I'll do that right now. So here's my metal tool, and see how I just like kind of lift it up. And at the moment, we want our piece to be leather hard. So not completely dry. It's kind of in the middle. It's not wet. It's not like, and see how I just like lifted it up. So here's the piece pulled up from the wear board. Okay, so one way you could do this to get the piece centered is to bring out 2 to 3 logs of clay and adhere it to the side. But I'm actually going to do a different way. Because it's a plate and I need all the space I can to trim the sides of it, I'm going to actually add some water to the base and to the wheel so it can stick and adhere to the piece. Add some water there, and I add some here. And I use the circles as my target to see exactly if it's centered. And I just press down lightly on the outside edge, and if it doesn't move, it's pretty stable. I use my needle tool in my hand positions like this using the needle tool, placed on the rear side of the splash pan right at the top of my piece. And with the wheel going slowly, I'm going to draw a line around the outside edge. And hopefully if the line draws all the way around, then we know that the piece is centered. At the moment, it doesn't hit at one point. Right here is the center. So I'm going to try to move it closer, just in that area. And I will check again by drawing another faint line in the piece. Okay, so the line happens all the way around my piece. Make sure it's stable, it's not moving. And I'll start trimming with the larger ribbon tool on the outside edge. And once I've trimmed the outer side, I will then level out the whole bottom of the piece. Okay, so this is one way the trimmed piece could look. It could look completely flat, no details, just a flat bottom and flat sides. So that's an option. You could also bevel the sides, putting your ribbon tool at an angle. See how I added a bevel on the side right here? And while I'm doing this, I lightly keep my opposite hand just resting on the piece so it doesn't fly off. Okay, once I've created that bevel, I'm actually going to go in and indent with the right angle tool. And see how the clay comes off like a ribbon? So that's when you know the clay is at a great consistency to trim at. It's a little rough right now. And now I want to give the inner part of the base, I want to cut in through the center, so the leg is only about like 1 inch wide. And I'll start from the center and move the ribbon tool out. And if you're unsure how to, one of the ways you could easily mess up this piece is by cutting directly through this and not knowing how deep the piece is. So I like to tap every once in a while to feel if the piece is shallow or if it's still pretty thick. We have a little bit of ways to go down. And I use my fingers to buffer or to smooth some of the lines as I'm going. So when I was making this, I used recycled clay, and some of the clay was purple. So it's going to come out a really fun, swirly, purplish white color. I think this is as far as I should go, so I'm going to just clean this part up in the center. I'm going to clean the outside just a little bit more. As you can see, I really like to exaggerate my legs of my pieces. All right, I think I'm just using my hands to smooth out the rest of it, and then I think I'm done. Oh yes, and the final thing we can do, we could add a signature or a stamp to the piece. So this is just a simple stamp I use to be my signature. I add it right in the middle, pressing delicately so it's not like pushing the piece in. But this is my signature right here. And then I'm just gonna lightly push the piece off the wheel to lift it up. Nice. So that's the inner trimmed piece. And I will just use my sponge to wipe off any extra clay that adhered to the top. And that is how I trim a plate. If you have a unique way of trimming, let me know in the comments. I'm curious to know like how other people make their pottery pieces, because I know that there's not just one way of how to make pottery. So let me know how you trim your pieces, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.